if you have decided to actively invest in real estate or even passively invest, passively invest, well, meaning you're not just putting your money in blindly with anyone, well, then I think you owe it to yourself with the access of knowledge that exists today to invest in your education. I mean, you're investing hundreds of thousands of dollars, or you want to become a millionaire or a multimillionaire. Well, you should be willing to invest a certain amount of money every year in your own education. I think it doesn't make sense otherwise.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to Weiss Advice. I am your host, as always, Yonah Weiss. I'm still Yonah Weiss, and this is Weiss Advice. Thanks for joining again, and I would love to introduce you to our guest today. We have someone very special, all the way up from Montreal, Nikolai Ray. What's going on, my friend?
Hey, Yonah, how's it going?
I'm doing great. I mean, it's always
awesome.
A pleasure to have a Canadian on the show. It's not too often we do, but I'd love to get into it because we talk a lot about real estate on this show. We talk a lot about life and in general and stuff like that. But I know you have an incredible perspective on real estate. For those of you who don't know or never heard of Nikolai before, let me give you a little brief background on who he is. He is not only a real estate investor focused on more kind of power. I don't know, maybe you could describe it a little better, but I would describe it as like really, deals that are kind of heavy lifts where it's either new construction or big redevelopment projects, not only in Canada, but also in the United States, right?
Yep.
And you are the founder of MREX. So tell us a little bit about MREX, which is a educational platform.
Yeah, well, actually, MREX is actually two different companies. So we have MREX Technologies and MREX College. So MREX Technologies, essentially what we're doing is the last couple of years, I've just invested, heavily into building technology platform for everyday real estate investors, where the idea is essentially you could say kind of a mix of a Bloomberg terminal and maybe a Robinhood, but for real estate investors. So the idea is to create one centralized platform that allows you to access the whole multifamily real estate market, access actual actionable data and insights and analysis, and as well as kind of, follow your own portfolio and track how your portfolio is performing, whether you're an active investor or maybe more of an LP in a syndication or whatnot. So the idea there is really to help democratize, access to real estate investing, but also to real estate intelligence. That's a big thing. And then on the other side of things, the MREX College is, really I just saw a huge gap in the education for real estate investors where on one side of the spectrum, you have universities, but I mean, university is good if you want to become an appraiser or if you want to work for an investment bank or whatever. It's very theoretical. It's not necessarily applied or specific. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, you have a lot of mentorship and coaching programs, which are all doing a very great job of, getting people in the game, getting people to take action, motivating people, connecting people as well. But I'd say that the curriculum at an academic and knowledge-based level is a bit limited, which is normal because you can't do everything. So what we've done is we've created an institution kind of that fills the gap where we're bringing university-level education and teaching, but in a very applied and specific niche way to everyday investors, small cap investors, retail investors, syndicators, and whatnot. And that's just, that's essentially what we've been doing for the last 5 years up here in Canada. We're opening more and more in the US now and worldwide. And yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
That's awesome. And so this college that you've created, which it sounds like it fills, like you said, an incredible gap that I've seen myself where, you really have to do a lot of the work if you want to learn about
Absolutely.
Anything with regard to real estate. And even these masterminds or, mentoring programs are much more, like you said, collaborative and practical. And yes, they may be analyzing deals, but you don't get the fundamentals and you're really missing that. You kind of do that on your own. So this sounds like
the market has become so sophisticated. I mean, multifamily real estate, when you think about apartment investing, it's such a beautiful asset class because you're getting returns that are somewhat skewed towards the stock market, like similar high returns, not quite as high, but you don't have the same volatility. You have a volatility that looks more like a bond, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very interesting investment class. But up until about 10 years ago, 5-10 years ago, it was either, mom and pops trading small apartment buildings and REITs trading really big apartments. But now, like with the Jobs Act that happened in the US in 2012, that's opened up a whole new industry of syndicators.
Right.
And that, plus the fact that quantitative easing after '08 with the global financial crisis brought so much money, injected so much money into the markets, that money, there's still money of that hasn't been allocated. And on top of that, all of the institutional funds and real estate investment trusts and private equity firms, family offices, sovereign funds, they all changed the way they allocate money. So instead of putting 8 to 10% of their money into alternative assets, which include real estate, they're all at about 12, 15, 20% now. So that's essentially doubled. On top of there's way more money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just what's that done is that's made the multifamily market much more competitive, and thus you have to be more sophisticated. So you can't just wing it now with, having read what a IRR is in a book like that. That's just not enough anymore.
So, I mean, it's kind of funny to put it like that, but you have a lot of people that really think that, okay, I read a book on real estate, and and now I can go out and do it. And I think a lot of these, not to hate on any of these masterminds or mentorship programs that are out there. I actually like them and commend them on what they're doing, but a lot of them are focused on just pushing people into that without having the proper knowledge. What would you say, for someone who's listening to this and they're like, okay, well, wait a second, he's just describing me. Like, what?
I'm a big fan of all the mastermind and coaching programs. And, I see myself as someone who's very collaborative and I'm there to support all those, whether it be like a Jake and Gino or a Rod Khalif or, a Brad Sumrock. And, I'm probably forgetting like a whole bunch of them, but I think they're all doing a great job. They all do it differently. I think some people have a different, some people will connect more with Rod, some with Brad, some with Jake and Gino. And that's what makes the beauty of humanity, is that we all kind of have these differences. But the way I see it is what we're doing is we're bringing a much stronger foundation to what all these organizations are doing. And, we're agnostic to the coaches and the mentors. I don't really care who you get coached from or mentored from. And obviously I'm more friends with some than others. The important thing is that you're accessing the real estate market, that you're acting upon your objectives and your dreams. Mm-hmm. And our goal is to just kind of give you that knowledge base to help you do it properly, because I don't think those organizations, their mission is to do that. I don't think they're equipped to do that either. They're much more on the practitionership side and the motivation side and the networking side, which are all very important and essential aspects.
Absolutely.
But the fact of the matter is, like we were talking about, we were talking about books not a couple of minutes ago. There is no book on the market that has 5% of the knowledge that I could probably teach you in 8 hours. Like they just don't exist, those books. So, and I'm just one of many teachers and professors that's at our college that can help. And so I think that's a very important thing I think it's not one or the other. I think it's all of it. Mm-hmm. I think people need to just not limit themselves. And like you said, I hear so many people who are like, oh, I don't need to take a course on that. I've read like all the books out there. Yeah, but all the books out there are essentially kindergarten books, right? Most real estate books out there are written for someone who's the equivalent of a kindergartner in real estate. So
they're filled with a lot of fluff. That's for sure.
Yeah, they're very
a bunch of them out there.
superficial, high level, which is fine, because most people are probably not ready for more than that. But if you have decided to actively invest in real estate or even passively invest, well, meaning you're not just putting your money in blindly with anyone. Well, then I think you owe it to yourself, with the access of knowledge that exists today, to invest in your education. You're investing hundreds of thousands of dollars, or you want to become a millionaire or a multimillionaire. Well, you should be willing to invest a certain amount of money every year in your own education. I think it doesn't make sense otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And are these courses available online, or are you strictly doing like in-class?
Yeah, we have a mix. So we have on-demand courses. Well, we're building all of them in English right now because they're all in French. So I'm just essentially translating everything right now. But we have essentially 3 types of courses. We have on-demand, bite-sized courses that are usually between 3 and 10-hour courses. So you can watch them whenever you want. They're already pre-taped. Then we have our flagship program, which is a certificate in real estate and financial engineering. That's a 3-month program. It's a mix of really live classes, and then you can watch them after that. And there are tutoring sessions and stuff like that. And then we also have a third kind of facet, which is we have an accelerator program, which is a 6-month program. It resembles a lot of the tech startup accelerator programs like Y Combinator and 500 Startups, but for real estate. So essentially it's 6 months. In the 6 months, we have 4 full weekend retreats in beautiful resorts. You have online stuff and meetings. So it's a mix really of online and in person. And it's 6 months, just 30 people, where we're there to help you take your real estate, go from a real estate investor to an actual real estate business owner.
Professional.
So whether that be through the syndication model or the joint venture model or just with your own funds, but we help you structure an actual real estate investment company and not just be a real estate investor.
That's important because I think that's missing. Some of those fundamentals where you're like, okay, well, what do I do? Do I open an LLC? Do I need to have, and obviously you're dealing with Canada, which the legalities are different.
Yeah,
in a lot of
they're
ways.
very similar. And we do the same. We'll be doing the same in the US. And I think the one major thing that people have to understand is that multifamily real estate specifically, and obviously commercial and industrial kind of all attaches to that. But my niche is multifamily. It's funny because you're an investor, but you're an entrepreneur, right? Because an apartment building is essentially a small business,
it's
right?
A business, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So, any real estate is a business. And I think that's the amazing thing. I've seen most of the people that I come in contact with, like you said, in the multifamily industry are entrepreneurs. Like that's literally what they are. And it's funny because many people come from like a corporate background and realize that they just didn't like it. They didn't fit in, but they did it because they had, that was the American dream, or that was what they were being sold, going to college, get a good job, et cetera. But they were never happy. And I've seen a lot of people kind of break out of that because they have that entrepreneurial spirit inside of them. That's awesome. And so, and that makes it for people who are much more committed to reaching goals and to, committed to making changes in life to better themselves and the communities around them. So I think
for sure.
It's a great mix. It definitely is, having that people. One thing I'd love to ask you, because you have a lot of knowledge, obviously, to be a professor, to teach this stuff, you have to really know it. Like, how did you go about learning the ropes in real estate? Where was your background in that and getting your feet
I'd say
wet
it's a really good mix. I mean, obviously, I have an academic background, so I studied biomechanics and preventive medicine at university. So I come from a very scientific background. On top of that, I'd say that the best way to understand me is I am like a Goodwill Hunting who's not white from Boston and who actually had parents. And one of my parents was half Indian from the northeast of India and Bengal. So I have many family members who were renowned engineers and physicists and Nobel Prize laureates. I mean, one worked with Albert Einstein, and they were essentially nominated for a Nobel Prize together. So I grew up in a very environment that was very axed towards knowledge and the power of your brain. Mm-hmm. And obviously, I probably had pre-existing competencies ingrained in me genetically, probably. So a mix of being a very strong self-learner, being very curious and open-minded, plus obviously an academic background, and then actually being a doer. Like I can be in a 3-piece suit with a bunch of CEOs and a bunch of scientists and researchers, but I can also be on the field in a sweatshirt, with a bunch of builders who are swearing and hammering on nails and stuff like that. So, I have a vast body of experience working on about $10 billion worth of properties, be it on the underwriting and analysis side, the transactional side, in investment banking and brokerages, and as well as an investor. So I think, just that melting pot of my eclectic background in life is probably what has allowed me to kind of achieve that level.
Yeah, and obviously you can tell when someone's excelling and someone is achieving levels beyond where even you thought you could get to. So what are you focusing on now? I mean, is the university, is that the main thing? Is it the development, the projects that you're working on? What do you see going forward? What's going to be your main focus?
Well, I'd say there are essentially two major focuses in my life right now. The MREX terminal, so the technology is right now in a private beta.
Mm-hmm.
So we have about 20 users here in Montreal on the terminal. That should be launched publicly in Canada by the fall. And then we'll open up our private beta in the US probably around the beginning of the year of 2022. So that's a really huge, that's a couple years in the works. That's almost $1 million in our own and personal investments. Like, I haven't taken any angel investors, no venture capital. We still control 100% of the company. So that's it's been a big project, a lot of naivete and a lot of faith. And then
I can't even start up.
Oh yeah, exactly. And then the college, obviously, it's just been growing over the last 5 years. I mean, it went from this very small idea of just wanting to share knowledge with people. And we've had almost 5,000 investors come through our doors already just in the province of Quebec, which is, it's a province, which for people in the US is the equivalent of a state. Right. It's a province of 8 million people, which is not even the size of Miami. So, now bringing that to the rest to English Canada and to the US is obviously a very big focus for me, because I think knowledge is power. I think it's the key to anything in life. And I think knowledge is a very important thing, and it must be shared. And I'd say those are definitely the two most important things for me right now, apart from my own real estate investments and obviously my family. My wife's going to give birth to our fourth child this summer. So that's
congratulations.
That's that other side of things for me.
Of course, yeah. There's always this stuff that we don't necessarily talk about, but are truly the most important things.
Oh, for sure.
But that's incredible. I want to kind of dig a little deeper, if you don't mind, into the terminal that you're building. How would you describe it if you had to, for someone that doesn't really know what it is? I mean, is it something along the lines of like what CoStar is doing in the US in terms of the data collection of things?
It's a very unique thing. So I'd say the best way would be to first negate some things.
Okay.
Starting off with, so there's essentially four major assets to the terminal. One is a news and information asset, which is essentially, think of the Bloomberg app, where you get all the Bloomberg news on the financial markets, and a mix with Real Vision. I don't know if you've ever heard of Real Vision, but essentially Real Vision is kind of like an anti-Bloomberg, where you have all these great discussions and analysis it's like the Netflix of knowledge and finance, right?
Okay.
So that's really built into our terminal, a very huge knowledge base and informational base.
Mm-hmm.
And then think of, with real estate markets, there's obviously LoopNet. You mentioned CoStar. There's LoopNet,
right.
Crexi, 10X. They're very broker-centric marketplaces. Right. Mm-hmm. They're not investor-centric. Their whole business model is for brokers.
Right.
I'm an investor at heart, and I'm an investment professional at heart. So I'm very investor-focused. So think of a marketplace or a search engine where you could access everything that you would want as an investor, but not through a broker marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, for example, what we've done here in Quebec, there's about 60,000 multifamily properties of at least 5 units and plus. We have every single property, all 60,000 that you can search through. And you can see if they're publicly listed right now, if they're being sold as a pocket listing, if they're not being sold. And then you have all the historic information. So then all the data that you get from a CoStar or Reonomy, which is very static and kind of raw data, we've translated it right into the listings of properties that are for sale and not for sale, which are passive, what we call off-market properties. We've translated them into a very actionable data set, kind of like making it kind of like have a Robinhood feel, where you don't have to have a master's in finance to actually understand what the data is telling you. So that's a very important thing, because if you think about transaction-wise, when you buy apartment buildings, about a third of the market that's transacted in a year is transacted off public listings. So Zillow, MLS, LoopNet, Crexi. Another third is done through pocket listings. So brokers who pass that along to their top clients.
Right.
And then another third is off-market properties, meaning maybe my neighbor has a 24 unit apartment building. He's mowing the lawn and I hear him kind of pissed off. And I say to him, hey, what's wrong, Jack? And he's like, I'm tired of that property, and I buy it off of him. That's an off market property. So the idea is to centralize all that into one marketplace, have actual usable data, even though you're not a master of finance, and then have finally a last part where you're able to actually track your portfolio like you would with a stock portfolio. Like if I buy a bunch of stocks, I can look up in my Robinhood or Webull or E-Trade and see how everything's performing. If I want to do that for my apartment buildings, I have to build a huge Excel. I have to input a whole bunch of information. It's very cumbersome and complicated. So our terminal does all that stuff all in one in a very simplistic way.
Interesting. So that would be valuable for even like passive,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
partners.
Yep.
That's great. Oh, that sounds very interesting. I mean, I've heard of some of these things kind of on their own.
Yep.
And they have these type of things, like even Zillow, for example, will have the data of all the residential properties, or the majority of them out there.
Right.
But once you get into commercial multifamily, it's much more limited.
Absolutely.
And it's much more, I'd say, not just limited in terms of the access, obviously, because it's very, very expensive, but also limited in terms of the data itself. I mean, if anyone is familiar with CoStar, it's great, but they sometimes may only have 50% of some of the data. And
once again, it's very broker centric,
right?
And when it's not broker centric, it's very institutional centric. It's very mid market centric. So, unless you have 5,000 units, Reonomy and CoStar and Yardi Matrix and all these things, they're not really for you. And I think the majority of the market I focus on, because my goal is to democratize the access to real estate investing, the market I focus on is people who own at least 5 to maybe 1,000 units, and obviously syndicators who maybe go up to about 10,000 units. But higher than that, like that market's already served by CoStar and Reonomy and LoopNet and Crexi and 10X, but there's no one for the small guys, And
there's no one there for sure. Yeah. No, it's definitely. I mean, when you see and as an investor yourself, when you see a need, when you see a gap, something like that needs to be filled, that's what an entrepreneur does, right? You see there's a lack, there's something that needs to be filled, and you just go out and do it and create it. And the fact that you spent, a couple of years building this program, it sounds like it's pretty exciting and will be in the future. Hopefully, by the time this airs, this won't air that far out, but we'll have a little more progress in that.
We'll be a bit closer.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be a bit closer, hopefully. Awesome. Amazing. So what do you see as the biggest challenge right now for someone, trying to get involved, whether it's the learning curve or whether it's just, the markets in general? Like, what do you think is the biggest challenge right now?
Probably the biggest challenge is cutting through all the noise, number one. Like, I think there's a lot of noise out there. We were talking about coaching programs. There's a lot of great ones. There are a lot of really bad ones too, right? Yeah. And there are more and more, because everyone can now essentially set up their own coaching program and their own courses online. And, it's become very easy. The barrier to entry for that has become very easy. Unfortunately, it's created a lot of noise, and people are just essentially repeating what everyone else is doing. The problem is when that first source wasn't exactly right, So it's like, and you've tagged me a lot of discussions on LinkedIn, and I'm very happy to jump in, where it seems like everyone's just spitting what everyone else is saying, and no one's actually thinking about these, like cap rates, for example. Everyone's saying, oh, well, I'm a conservative underwriter, so I take my purchase cap rate and I add 5 basis points to it every year until exit. Okay, why? And then they give you the same answer of what the other guy said, and the other guy says, and then you ask him why, and he says, well, because the other guy said that. And then you realize that everyone's just essentially the latest fool. They're just repeating each other, and no one's actually thought about any of this. So I think, and now all these people who don't even know what they're really talking about, and who are just copycats of copycats of copycats, are now, they all have this tribune now, thanks to social media, which is also a good thing. But cutting through that noise is a very difficult thing for a newbie and a beginner, number one. And number two, well, it's become such a competitive market, right? Yeah. It's crazy. Like, everyone and their grandmother is now a syndicator. Everyone and their aunt or their cousin has, 8 million units under management. So it's like, who's full of crap? Who knows what they're doing? And on top of that, you got to compete against them now, because now you even have a bunch of people who don't know what they're doing, who are raising tons of capital because there's so much money in the market. It's so much money's been printed. Everyone's been saving.
Yep.
And they're all running after these deals. So how do you distinguish between truth, false, and all that in between? It's very hard.
That's challenging. So
that's why I feel it's so important that I share as much as I know to help at least a couple people cut through that.
I agree. There's so much noise out there, and I totally relate to exactly what you're saying here. I mean, I just had someone today reach out to me, very friendly gentleman, who I'm acquainted with and knows a lot of the same people I know. He's a passive investor, and said, "Hey, do you know so-and-so?" Someone reached out to me online, happened to know who the person is. And he said, he says he owns, owns and manages 1,700 units. I'm just like trying to get a feel for him, see if I should invest in him. What's your opinion on the guy? And I said, it's to the best of my knowledge, he's, doing his first deal right now, and, and a lot of times he may have passively invested in some deals.
He passively invested 0.1% in 1,700 units.
Exactly. So there's a lot of that going on, and I totally relate to that. But the question is, how do you cut through that noise, and how do you overcome that?
A lot of check signers, I call them check signer investors. The only investments they've actually done is they've signed a check. They've signed over $25,000 into a syndication. I mean, not just because you put $25K into a syndication about 1,700 units, you don't have 1,700 units. And I may be old school, but where I come from, saying that you have 1,700 units makes you a shyster.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I'm glad you kind of framed it like that, because I see a lot of this coming through. I've always had an aversion to that type of portrayal of one's own accomplishments when you're definitely not there. And the position that I'm in is I'm in a very good position in terms of the business that I have, the cost segregation, that I'm working with people that own property. And so
you're seeing their actual numbers.
Exactly. And I see, I'm seeing hundreds of people, right? Or even, over 1,000 of, syndicators and all these people across the country. So I know exactly who's doing deals. And and so for me, that's a good position to be in, to kind of give a little more objectivity to my opinion of what people do. Not that I go out of my way to do that. I'm not, I think everyone has to start somewhere. And,
for sure.
But to claim that you have more than you do, just to kind of give yourself an edge in the eyes of, the unknowing.
Yeah.
And,
it's very, for me, it's very dishonest, and I'm dishonest. Yeah. I'm a person of principle and of values. And I think it's a very dangerous, like, if you're willing to do that, what does that say about your character and about, other things down the road? Like, what are you going to be willing to do? And, where are you going to be willing to, play with the truth a bit? And what's your decision making going to be like? And that always worries me quite a lot.
Absolutely. It's a big red flag. Absolutely. And in terms of, would I go ahead and then invest in a deal with someone who makes those audacious, claims? And I get hit up all the time, people coming to me on, podcasts and, so-and-so is a great guest. They own 3,500 units. And wait a second, I know this person. Like, they don't own 35. But again, it comes to that. It's what are you painting yourself as? And I think the integrity wins, the high road wins every single time.
I think the problem is we live now, obviously, with social media in a very egocentric world and a very fake it till you make it.
Yep.
And like I was saying earlier, social media is a great thing, because for a person like me, it's opened a lot of doors for me to share what I'm doing, and I think I've helped quite a lot of people down the road. But the flip side of that is that it's also allowed a whole bunch of people who should not have a tribune, and now people think that these people, it's created all these kind of fake messiahs, essentially. And that's in real estate investing. That's in a bunch of all these entrepreneur things of people, and you're like, how many businesses have you built? Tell me about your business. And then you listen and you're like, it sounds like you're just repeating a Robert Kiyosaki book. Like, it doesn't sound like you've actually done anything.
Right. Whether or not Robert Kiyosaki actually did anything either. That's
yeah, exactly.
It goes back to the, just repeating the guy.
That just comes to show you.
Oh man, this is great. But Nikolai, I would love to transition now into the final four. These are four questions we ask all of our guests towards the end of the episode. And so the first question for you is, what's the worst job that you ever had?
Lumberjack.
Really?
So when I was playing junior hockey in Northern Ontario, I was 17 or 18 years old, and I got injured. I injured my knee. I had to have a reconstructive knee surgery. So my ligaments had all torn. That's really bad for skating, for ice hockey. But, day to day, it's not that big of a problem. So I was dating a girl in the town that I was playing hockey in, and her dad had a lumber company. So he was like, "Hey, you got 10 months of doing nothing. Would you like to make some money and, keep in shape a little bit? And so come work for me." So I actually worked as a lumberjack in Northern Ontario, up at the end of the tree line there for about 10 months. So in summer, it's so hot and there's so many mosquitoes. You're wearing a full suit. And despite that, you get bit about 50 times a day. And all you hear is a constant like bzzz all the time. And then in wintertime, you're happy because there's no mosquitoes and it's not hot, but it's minus 40. And at the end of your shift, you have to have an hour-long boiling hot shower just to feel your fingers again.
Oh, wow.
So that was really an eye-opening moment for me to be like, okay, you need to make sure you keep on with your education and your hockey career so that if one doesn't pan out, the other one will.
And I take it the hockey career didn't pan out.
I ended up playing 2 years professionally, didn't make it to the NHL because of two really bad injuries. And but I mean, it brought me so many other things, and I had managed to keep on studying at university as I was playing hockey. So that allowed me to, as you can see behind me, the Olympic Games. That's an actual Olympic game. Dossard. I went to the Olympics 3 times as the chief of human performance for the Canadian Olympic teams in sports like biathlon. So my education and my athletic career really helped me transition into real life after. So
very cool. That's awesome. Yeah. And everything we do really helps us. And even the first jobs help to teach us, whether it's at least what I don't like doing, but oftentimes it helps to teach us also, many lessons along the way.
It's the toughest jobs and the hardest moments in our life. And it's the suffering that teaches us the lessons and allows us to advance, I think.
100%. So can you give me a book? And I know you're very educated, and I'm sure the book that you'll probably say is something I've never heard of before, but a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift.
I was thinking about that question. I'd say business-wise, probably the Jim Collins book, Good to Great. I'm sure that's been spoken about a couple times on your show. That's definitely the whole concept of getting the right people on the bus, and that's the most important thing. And then you'll find a seat for them. But that as an entrepreneur or a team builder, you're essentially a bus driver, and your job is to get the best people on your bus. That's really something powerful for me. And, I'd like to say all the spiritual books that I've read in my life, like I've read, everything from Buddhism to Judaism to every single spiritual book has just been together a mind shift for me to be more open-minded and to have a spiritual side to myself. And I think that's definitely what has impacted me quite a lot.
Oh, good. Well, we'll put those. We're not going to put all the spiritual books in the show notes, but we'll.
It'd be too long. But I grew up in a very multi-ethnic family. With family members from the northeast of India who were Buddhists, others were Hindu, others were Brahmins. I had an uncle who was a Zoroastrian. My best friends growing up were Jewish. My mother's Catholic. So it's all these religions and spiritualities have really been, I think, very great lessons. They all have amazing lessons to learn from. So
right, absolutely. So, third question for you: what is a skill that you would like to learn?
A skill that I would like to learn, it's not so much a skill I'd like to learn, but I'm very passionate about culture and language, and I just wish I could pick up a new language. I wish I was in the Matrix where you could just upload, take a disc, upload it, and be like, okay, I speak Hebrew now. Because whenever I travel a lot, I love, and I always make an effort to at least know a little bit of the language of where I am, because I think it allows you to connect much more with people, and it allows you to show them that they're important to you and you respect them and their culture, and that you're not just there as in a very transactional mindset. I think I don't live life in a transactional way. I don't run businesses that way. And I think that's a very important way to build good relationships with people.
Awesome. So if there was one language that you could upload right now, which one would it be?
Oh, boy. I already speak English and French perfectly. I speak a bit of Spanish, a bit of Mandarin. I speak, that's a tough one. Jeez. Probably Hebrew. Yeah. I know like the basics, because my father's business partner was Jewish, and a lot of my friends were Jewish, and I'd always grow up in the U.S. going to to various gatherings, and probably Hebrew. I think it probably bring me the most benefits, just because of how spread out the culture is, and the business orientation. I think there's a lot to learn from that. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, there you go. That's it's also,
maybe you can help me.
Yeah. I'll build a course or something. Right? Fourth and final question for you? What does success mean to you?
Success means to me, it's just about creating. It's just about being valuable. For me, success is just being valuable. Being valuable in everything that you do, creating value for others, and essentially your life is valuable because of that. And I think that's just the way that we should live our lives. And not everyone does that. And it's not the easiest of things, but I think we're here for a short period of time. And if you're not creating value, then what are you doing? Essentially.
100%. There's so much truth to that. I love that perspective. It's something, we get a different answer from everyone, every episode, slightly variations, but I think it's so important if you're, it's focusing on others also, right? That's the main thing.
For sure.
Awesome.
For sure.
So Nikolai, where can our listeners find you or reach out to you if they choose to?
You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. There's only one Nikolai Ray apparently in the world, I think, especially only one in real estate. Otherwise, MREX College has a YouTube channel. We're starting to put some more and more English content on there. Obviously, if you speak French, we already have a loaded channel. So there's that. MREX College is on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook as well. And I'm quite active on and off on social networks. But I'm usually lurking around there somewhere. So.
Yeah, exactly. And if we tag you, then you'll show up in full force.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure. Always good to speak with you. And I hope our listeners got a lot of value out of this. I certainly did. And hope you join us again soon. And to our listeners, remember, the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.